And it was kind of hard to interpret, but that's what I came up with.
Okay, wait a minute, say that again. In 2003, you said...
The Fed, the Federal Reserve Bank, which is not a member of the federal government, has no reserves, and is not a bank, but nonetheless controls our lives through the money, would become irrelevant. And what it actually turned out to be, I'm giving you one of our errors here, because this is all interpretation and therefore can go horribly wrong, but one of our errors was interpreting it the way I did, because I just said flat out the Fed will become irrelevant. And actually what it was that it would no longer be effective. Their rate increases after that point would no longer raise up the long-term rates. So you see, if I'd interpreted it properly, I could have given a lot of bond people a big heads up.
Right, and yet what you said was absolutely right. It's just that your understanding of what you said was a little different than the actual meaning of what you said.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so I need to point that out, that we are frequently wrong that kind of way as we go forward.
Okay.
Because I don't want anybody to mistake the words that I necessarily have to use to describe a pending situation as being somehow written in stone.
Right, but not wrong in the information you gleaned from the runs, but your interpretation.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense.
So in that sense, we're always dealing with my interpretation, but it's getting better because I pay attention to mistakes like that.
Right.
And some of the things that we've gotten this year have pointed out that, for instance, we would have silver behave oddly. For whatever reason, silver is a commodity. All the words relating to silver in every which way, shape, and form decided they'd all go off on their own little emotional thing and cluster around this new point in our model space. They separated themselves literally, actually, within the model space from all of the other elements that are usually associated with a thing we called markets. So I told everybody, hey, silver's going to be a bit odd here. And it's separating on its own, and it's moving off, and it's going up when the markets are going down. Now, I have to add that our model space is split in half, vertically and horizontally. And more or less figure that the halfway point marks neutrality, emotional neutrality. And so we've seen the markets headed in a downward fashion all year. We've also seen, oddly, since, I don't know, maybe March or so, that silver would separate itself and start going off on its own. And that was the sort of interpretation that we passed out, and it turns out that silver as a commodity that people might invest in has indeed behaved very oddly.
Okay.
And is not going down in price when other circumstances really should say that it ought to. So we've been somewhat accurate with a few of these things. Now, in a general sense, we can say that humans on this planet are entering a very trying time. Economically, this trying time will start to manifest itself with some real severity in December, and that severity will continue for a number of months.
Okay.
Now, I say this based on some charts that we've got that show what we like to call an emotional tension value, and that is the actual division of the long-term carry value with the emotional impact of the word value. So it's 2 out of the many different arbitrary numbers I stuck in there. I divide them, and whatever that ratio is, it gives us this long-term emotional trend. And it shows us taking something occurring in December, and we'll just leave the something out for a moment. And associated with that something, somewhere around December 3rd, and heading on for a number of months thereafter, is what looks to be a pretty serious general emotion. Well, what we've actually got, let me state flat out, is a 0.02 of a point drop in emotional tension. So that's a 0.02 of a point emotional release. And as by way of comparison, I can say that the emotional release that followed the Sumatra earthquake was about 1/3 that size.
Wow. No.
Now, this does not necessarily mean that we're talking about earthquakes or earth changes or any of that. Because at this point, it's a little hard to determine exactly what we are discussing because it's so far out.
But it is something that is so strong. Now, when you say an emotional release, you mean whatever, like during the tsunami, okay? Do you think of that as an emotional release when that happened?
Correct. Our graph showed that as this downward drop of a value which we can just say was X, and currently we have something showing up in December that's 3 times that.
The reason
the number is meaningless. I could say, you know, that the value of the drop was 10 for the Sumatra earthquake, and we're now dealing with 30.
The reason I find that interesting is I do not like to give predictions. I haven't done it in a long time, but I used to do it all the time, and I was very, very accurate. And about, I don't know, 2 months ago or so, when I had our dear friend Michael Mandeville on, who's on every week with me, I said, Michael, I'm going to give my prognostication, something, a major, major event, and I can still see the feeling that I had because it's drawing me to the southeast. I don't know if it's within the U.S. or beyond, but I said it's going to be a major, major event. And I said, but it's out fairly far. It's months down the line. And now
well,
you're
December
saying
3rd.
Oh, is that right? December 3rd?
Now, bearing in mind that our timing sucks frequently.
Yeah. Well, okay, but that's it's interesting because I haven't followed it through from my point of view, but I do feel that this is a major event that's going to happen, and now you're coming up, Cliff, and saying basically the same thing.
Oh, certainly. I mean, there's absolutely no question that the level of the emotional release that we're getting now for December and January, February, March, April, May, June is staggering. Because the initial hit that we show on December 3rd of the emotional release, the tension value going out. But let me back up for a second, describe our chart real quick, okay?
Yeah.
I've come to realize in the course of doing this work that humans operate under cycles. And we can think of a cycle as lasting of an indeterminate time, and within that cycle might be other cycles. And we've just left one cycle, which I'm choosing to call cohesion or union. Because if you think about it, think of all the events that have happened in the last year, and many of the larger public events were related to things that keep humans together. Say, for instance, the EU Constitution, or the eminent domain decision of the recent Supreme Court one, et cetera, et cetera. All these go towards social union, cohesion, et cetera. This turned out to be the metadata trend that we've been operating under for what looked to be like maybe 2.5 years or more. Now we're about to shift into another metadata trend, which I'm calling aggression or militancy. This has a number of other words. Let me also have to back up this. I'm so sorry to have to do this.
No, that's fine. Please.
But our lexicon is this big dictionary, but all these words are interrelated. They have links between each other. So, for instance, I went to this in 1994 through 96. I went to the trouble of going through the dictionary and saying this word is related to this word, not only by meaning, but also by emotional intensity, et cetera, and drawing all these cross links. So I can go to one word, and I come up with a word that says, aha, military. And then I find that another word is in our association, and it says accident. And I think, these two are strongly associated within this context by this emotional connection. Therefore, I'll put them both into this screwy theory number 153, which we posted on George's site, that said military accident against the money center. So it was the cross-link that allowed me to pull those two together before I'd even, because I'm not in evil... because I'm not into doing bad things, I didn't even model the word terrorism within our dictionary. It was not in the original word that I'd been playing with. So I had to sort of come up with it that way. So at this point, we've got a situation where these words are cross-connected. Our emotional tension is apparently operating under this meta-cycle that is bigger than any of the other entities, and all the other entities, if I interpret them correctly, are operating within this cycle, and we're about to end one cycle and move into this other, this militancy, aggression, non-cohesion really is what it amounts to. There's other words in there like rebellion against authority or individualization, many other words that are associated with this general meta theme. But I've chosen to call it militancy because that seems to be what is rising up.
Now, this is the new one you're talking about, right?
Correct.
December
the cycle
3rd.
begins on August 12th, according to our data. Thereabouts. Our timing is getting better, but it's always been a weak point in this because we're using arbitrary values everywhere, but we're trying to assign them against a real-world calendar.
Right, okay.
Now, within that, this metadata cycle, I ran out some long-term projections, appears to operate for a number of years, out through at least 2008. So we'll be dealing under this, if you will, cloud of things, militancy or aggression or conflict or competition. That having been said, the cycle begins in August. We have some kind of event in mid-August. That event has a short building period and then a release, so we should become aware of it. I think it'll hit the mainstream media and we'll talk about it for a few weeks. And then we go back into this as a result of that event, or coincident with it, we go back into an emotional tension building period. And that building period is quite long. I've never seen anything like it in the few years we've been running this. And it builds from late August through September all the way up through December 3rd, when there's ups and downs, of course. It's not a continuous build.
Yeah.
But in a general long-term trend, it's like this sort of flattened bell curve sweep upward made up of all these little ups and downs. And then along comes December 3rd, and there's a drop. Not a huge drop.
Yeah.
But a significant drop. But then a slight build back up, lasts for a couple of days, maybe a week or two, and then another big step down that continues on from December with very little let up all the way through May or so. Not a precipitous straight down 45-degree angle or anything, and there are little ups and downs, but the general overall trend is a pretty steep 30-degree, So that's the order that we're seeing. Now the Sumatra quake, even with all of the aftermath, its impact didn't much go past March. So the event we're seeing here not only has a 3 times level release in the month of December, in the month of occurrence, but the overall impact from that point on continues out as far as our model extends in the detail.
Which is twice as long.
Correct.
7 months, right? Yeah.
And may continue much beyond our May termination point, because we just don't have any detailed data at this point to run out June or July.
Now, Cliff, in hearing you describe it, and even some of the associated words, meaning military and what have you, could this, and I'm putting my own interpretation, and that's wrong, but could it be an event that might cause martial law?
Certainly. I mean, but it's entirely speculation. Yeah. What I can say is that it's a large emotional release, and that we'll all be operating under a general cloud of militancy, but this may not in any way end up being an event that's in any way associated with the military or armies or anything.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, it could be something like a global financial collapse. That would have the same level of emotional release.
Ah, okay.
Or it could be a near miss of an asteroid that everybody gets to see. That, again, would have the same level of emotional release in the immediacy, although I could not imagine that extending on for a number of months.
True.
An economic collapse, I certainly could.
Yes, or would it be possible, because we've been told now so many times by the government that, you got to question it, but that they are aware that there might be as many as 22 or 25 suitcase nuclear bombs in the country. Could it be that an event using some of these bombs might happen?
I want to say that in the data that we've got, there's nothing that would say that is not within the realm of possibility. I would like to point out, though, from an analysis viewpoint, especially as someone who's read the Army War College material on the manufacture of nuclear weapons of all grades and sizes, that seems unlikely in the main, because any nuclear device in a suitcase would have to be maintained.
That's true. And a lot of people
miss that. If you've got to go stash it somewhere and you're stashing it longer than 6 months, somebody's got to be visiting that thing about every 3 weeks.
Okay.
So I find it unlikely that such an occurrence could happen.
But we could have it happen sometime within this country, though, right? Because people talk about it so much, it's almost like we are creating it.
I wouldn't dispute you.
Okay.
I'm not going to agree, because I want to make... You understand, I find I have a responsibility here, right? I do not wish to pander to fear.